You know that sort of Switch eShop like started out pretty like well curated, right? Like for the first few months, you got like maybe 5 to 6 games per week on the eShop, and they were all like pretty, if not good, they were like normal. Even if they weren't great, like they had like a baseline of like establishment and polish that could really only come through relatively strict standards of what got to be published. It kind of reminded me more of the early like Xbox Live Arcade days, of like 2008 to 2010, where you were only getting a few games, but they were all at least like memorable and relevant, So there were like, I don't know, there were a lot of quality games early on, but even if you weren't getting like a constant drip feed of them. But then in like 2017 or so, the Switch really took off. Like the end of 2017 was so significant for the Switch. It became Nintendo's first real real star hit since the Wii in 2006. Developers and publishers started to see potential profit, and Nintendo owning the storefront also started to see potential profit, and that led to more games on the eShop. And in part that's good, but in another part it meant that every new game took a little bit less of the spotlight than it may have in the months or years before. And yes, a lot of the new games are bad, but what's worse to me are the games that are perfectly competent, functional, and will be forgotten in a matter of hours. It's the unremarkable, the forgettable, that push out the genuinely special and memorable, either in the good or bad categories. And I think that's kind of a shame. So Switch Stance is going to be where I talk about that. This is a show not about just Switch games from the eShop, but interesting Switch games from the eShop. They don't even have to be good. They just got to get stuck in my very stupid brain up here. Now, luckily, the game I want to start with here is both interesting and good, and a lot of games are both of those. And happily, that's a pretty common thing, even with the glut of games that we see coming out every day on the eShop. Super Crush KO hits on two things. The first is style, the second is control. Its aesthetic is simple and effective, visually based in pink and cyan, the same two colors which make up the clothing of the main character, Karen. Though other colors slip in, obviously, those two make up the bulk of the backgrounds, and they're the two that generally are going to stick with you throughout. It's consistent, and consistency is the main theme that I really felt throughout my experience with Super Crush KO. As a main character, Karen is not the deepest, but that's really not that big of a problem in a game so self-contained. Effectively, the narrative is this, and spoilers for Super Crush KO are incoming. An alien woman, Anne, steals Karen's cat, Chubbs, from her apartment. Karen wants Chubbs back, and she chases after Anne. Anne wants Chubbs because Chubbs is a cute, nice little cat, and that's most of it, save for the ending. This is my point. It's all very self-contained, very well controlled, and that's another important theme here. Control, both in that wider sense of being consistent in your game's production and in the sense of you, as the player, controlling Karen, is so completely satisfying. Controlling Karen in Super Crush KO is so simple. Each button does what it does and no more, and the game teases out each of those mechanics over time, so you're really never left confused by it. It's simple enough learning it, and it takes place over such a satisfying curve that eventually you'll end up doing one of the coolest, smoothest combos you've ever seen in a game without really even trying. I amazed myself a few times because I became really very skilled at the game without even noticing I was doing it. The curve of progression is relatively short, and so is the narrative. And so is the game as a whole. It only takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete at the high end. There are but 4 neighborhoods through which you progress with 4 stages within each, and a mech you fight at the end of each of those. Each neighborhood is similar in aesthetic, both visually and musically, but there's enough of a change that it gives each neighborhood a feeling of being, unique parts of a whole city, much like, the neighborhoods in any big city. Every aspect of the game is built off of that sort of simplicity. Every attack is built on simple button presses. Every stage is built upon enemies whose actions you come to recognize. Every aesthetic decision is built on simple shapes and repeated colors. And I think that's why the pink and cyan of Karen's jacket, repeated in so many of the cityscapes, stuck out to me. It's a game of simple, repeated motifs placed with such dexterity and control that it makes each aspect feel precisely where and how it needs to be. Effectively, there are two colors in my head, and everything is in its right place. Sorry, what was it I was trying to say?
Sorry? For free? Hot dog!